Welcome back. This is Dr. Heather Lee, and this is a discussion about assessment. The first video talked about a paradigm shift related to assessment, where instead of viewing assessment as something that's negative, something that's done to students, done for a grade, completed at the end of instruction, instead we're considering assessment something that is done for teachers, for students, something that should build confidence in students, and something that teaches us as teachers how did we do and how did our students do. We're going to shift gears and talk about principles of assessment, and there are 5 key principles that I'd like to share with you. They are that assessment should be student-centered and positive, clearly aligned, varied, of high quality, and ongoing. And let's unpack each of those for a few minutes. The first one is that assessment should be student-centered. That means focused on the student, and it should be a positive thing. It should be viewed as an opportunity to show learning. And if you have this perspective and you teach your students that perspective, they will start to have it too. If you are eager for testing, if you have a positive attitude about it, they may shift too, even those who may have dreaded tests for a long time. It really will have an impact on how you talk about it. It should be about the students, their needs and their styles. So we should always be thinking, who are my students and how can I best assess them? Not at the end, not just at the end, all the way through. Assessment should never be viewed as a punishment. And I really want to challenge you on this because often we make statements like we threaten students with the quiz if they're not paying attention. Or the way we bring it up, we say, all right, everybody, you have a test coming up on Friday, and we let them boo. And, you know, we almost encourage a negative perspective about tests, about assessment, about quizzes. But that is not good. It's not to catch them. It's to let them show their learning. So think about the reality of that. You might hear that and go, oh, yeah, right, that's never going to happen. But it can happen. Really think about your purposes for giving assessment and how you can have a positive perspective about it. Number 2 is that assessment should be clearly aligned. And we've talked about this several times, and I just can't tell you how important it is. That's why I'm harping on it. That everything that you assess should be based on your learning goals, the standards, and your instruction. You should not be assessing something that you have not taught. And you really don't need to be teaching something if you don't plan to assess it. Now, sometimes it's not a formal assessment. It may be a different type of informal assessment or something that you only observe for. But there should be a reason for everything we're doing in the classroom. We have such little time. Time is critical, and there is much to learn. And it doesn't mean we pack in, meaningless knowledge. We need to get rid of things that don't take us in the right direction with our students. So assessment should be clearly aligned. Another part about alignment, I just mentioned aligning the content, what they're studying. So it should line up with the learning goals and the instruction. But also the cognitive complexity should be aligned. Now, cognitive complexity, cognitive talks about the brain. And remember we've talked about levels of thinking and students thinking lower level of facts and knowledge and explaining things versus higher level where they're analyzing, they're synthesizing, they're creating new things, they're judging things. Well, cognitive complexity needs to be lined up in our assessments. If your learning goal is that they will analyze something and then you have them on a test simply list basic facts or just explain something, that is not aligned. Your cognitive complexity is not the same. The assessment is too easy for what the goal says they should know. And the opposite happens too, where we teach them a bunch of facts about something, and then we give them something very difficult to do on a test. And it's unfair because we have not properly taught them how to do it. So those are 2 types of alignment, content alignment and cognitive complexity. A third principle of assessment is that it should be varied. And I know I keep using the word test a lot, and that is paper and pencil. That is classic, that is old school, that is very, very traditional, and it's something that we need to learn how to do. But it should not be the only thing. Paper and pencil, classic written questions, multiple choice essays, that should not be the only way that you monitor student learning and you assess them, because it doesn't give you a full understanding. It helps you to know if someone's a good test taker, if someone is used to your style of tests, if someone always does well with paper and pencil. But what about a student who doesn't have very good reading comprehension, but has great understanding of history or science or math, but they just can't show it to you on a paper and pencil? But on a project, they knock your socks off with their creativity and their understanding. And so we need to have a variety of ways that we assess students. So written, oral, that's out loud, reports, presentations, kinesthetic, that's hands-on, projects, many different ways that offer variety. Number 4, our assessments need to be of high quality. Basically, we're saying they should be good. It should be a good quality test, assignment, homework, observation, project. It needs to follow the accepted assessment guidelines. Now, let me tell you, those guidelines, they're long and they're very complex, and it's something that you learn after a long time of teaching and practicing, if you're willing to practice. But there are guidelines to follow with assessment. And if you don't follow those guidelines in assessment, what suffers is validity and reliability. When tests are of high quality, they're valid and they're reliable. And those are two important words, and I want to take a few minutes to unpack those two words. We're going to learn about validity and about reliability. Now, the first word is validity. Now, if something is valid, we can use the word true. It's true. And here's a definition. It measures what it says it measures. A test designed to cover a specific unit should contain the items that reflect the major concepts and principles from that unit and no others. So that test is true to what it says. If it's a test on the Civil War, that's what it's on, the Civil War. And it is a valid test. So one way to know if your test is valid is to ask yourself, will the interpretation of the results, will the information I get be appropriate, be meaningful, be useful? If you give a test quiz project and the results don't tell you anything, it's not valid. It won't help you know the truth about how much your student has learned. Here are some validity violators. These are things that if you include them, they hurt the validity. One thing is extras. If you include something on the test that really doesn't go because it's not part of a learning goal. Here's one that surprises people, bonuses. We love bonuses. We love an extra 2, 5, or 10 points. But the thing about bonuses is that if someone gets a 100% on an exam, that should tell us that they've learned 100% of the learning objectives. But if 10 of that was a bonus, then that means that there's something, 10 points worth on that exam that they didn't learn. And the teacher needs to know, what of my objectives did that student not learn or not get? And a bonus can skew those results. We've talked about this, not including all of the objectives that were supposed to be taught on an assessment hurts its validity, and having minor things worth far too much of the grade. Something that was lower level knowledge that you only spent one day on, but it happens to be easy to make into matching or multiple choice or true false, and it ends up being 40 or 50% of the test. That's not valid because that information was not worth that much. Okay, so that's validity. Is it true? Does it do what it says it does? And the other key term here is reliability. And reliability refers to the precision, the accuracy of the test, how accurately the test measures student achievement. Poorly written questions lower test reliability. And so we're going to talk about a couple of these things. A key word is consistency and reliability. If I gave this test again to these students next week, would I get the same results? Do I get similar results with period 8 that I get with period 7? Or if I give this test next year, will I still be learning what I need to learn from that test? Is it reliable? So you ask yourself, will I get the same results the next time it's given? Here are some things that hurt reliability. If a test is too short, it doesn't include all the things it should, and as a result, if it's given time and time again, it doesn't give you enough information. Also, if you don't use a proper rubric. Rubric should clearly explain, and we'll talk about rubrics in assessment part 2 when we talk about non-traditional assessments. But if that rubric isn't well worded to include all of the learning objectives and the levels of thinking, then the grade really won't match. Or a teacher might have difficulty using it. You might use it 1 year and get one result, but you could grade the same test a year later and get a different result with that rubric. That shouldn't happen. And also changing in the way the teacher grades. For example, if your students take an exam and you start grading them on Friday night and you finish them up on Monday, you are in 2 different frames of mind, and you may be grading those tests a bit differently. Maybe more likely, by the end you're just tired of the poor grammar and you're taking off more points, you know. A better way to grade tests is to grade all the page 1s at one time. And then you flip to page 2 and you do all the page 2s. So you don't total up the total points until the end. The good thing about this is, first of all, it covers up the name. So you're not thinking, oh, this is Sarah's test, I know she's going to do well, and more inclined to give her points or be easier on her grading, and vice versa. And it also helps to prevent, and more than just the name of the student, also you might do all the page 1s and then take a break and do all the page 2 at a certain time, and that will give you better reliability. Okay, so validity and reliability are 2 important terms that help you. If you can understand those and you stay away from those violators, then you will have better quality tests. And the final key principle that we'll talk about is that tests should be ongoing. They are not tests, assessments, quizzes, observations, projects. These things should be ongoing and not just a product at the end. If you save it for the end and you don't assess before and during, then it's a surprise to you. You may not know until the unit is done that students were struggling with it. And then you'll feel like you have to move on, and you won't go back and use it the way it should be used. So we have 3 key types of assessment. We have pre-assessment that's used before instruction, and it may be immediately before instruction. It may be weeks before when you're planning a unit. Then there's assessment during instruction, formative assessment, and then finally there's assessment that's after instruction, summative or post-assessment. It may be at the end of a lesson, or it may be at the end of a week or the end of a unit. But there should always be something, at least at the very end, that is a major culminating assessment. And in our next video, we're going to be talking about each of those in detail: pre-assessment, formative, and summative. Thank you so much. Have a great night.